Who knows? Who knows?
Oh, boy.
At my age, how can I remember?
Come on.
This week's Torah portion is Parshas Vayishlach. In the Blue Chamashim, it's page 171. And this is the continued adventure of Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, our forefather. At the end of last week's Torah portion, we were busy talking about how Yaakov left from his homeland and he journeyed to the house of Lavan. And there he set his eyes upon a girl, Rachel, and he worked for 7 years to gain her hand, only to be deceived by Lavan. When the wedding came, I hope that doesn't happen to me. When the wedding came and they were about to do the marriage ceremony, he saw that it was to be Leah, even though that him and Rachel had prearranged signs so that they should know who was who. Still, Rachel, who was a good person, as we see throughout their history, a caring person, she taught her older sister the signs in order that she shouldn't be embarrassed. And thus, Yaakov marries Leah and then continues to work another 7 years to gain Rachel's hand. And at the end of his 14 years, he comes out a wealthy man. Financially wealthy, materially wealthy, and at the same time he's married to two great women, two of her matriarchs. So he's also spiritually wealthy. We know he was a man of Torah. So he was Torah, wealthy. He was just an all-around wealthy person. And he continues on his travels, and he's now in the beginning of a Torah portion. He's about to encounter his evil brother Esav, his older brother Esav. And before we continue into that part of the story, just a little insight on the name of the Parsha. We know that every single Parsha has a special name. And that name emphasizes something not only about the Parsha, but also something that we can learn out from and take with us for that all week while we learn. This week's Parsha is called Parsha Vayishlach. And Vayishlach means, and he sent. Now, the Parsha before this week's Parsha was called Parshas Vayetze, which means, and he went out. And next week's Torah portion, God willing, will be Parshas Vayeshev, and he settled. So these three Parshas in order, and he went out, and he sent, and he settled, are the three processes of purifying the world through a person's abilities. How so? Vayetze means that he goes out. And in that week's Torah portion, it details how Yaakov left from his homeland of Israel to a foreign land, in a foreign house where Lavan was from, where they did not stress on Torah and mitzvos, and nevertheless he was considered a good influence there. He continued to do his commandments and his praying and his learning and his belief in God as if he was in the perfect environment. That shows a level of what is called a personal shlichut, a personal outgoingness, a personal dedication to purify your surroundings, even if they might not be the best environment. Every single person is put onto this earth for a purpose and a mission. And part of that mission, on the way, you'll be encountering and enlightening many people with your own personal talents and your own personal qualities. So last week's Torah portion emphasized how Yaakov took his personal qualities and he went into a foreign land, something that he's not familiar with, and flourished there, and at the same time influenced his surroundings and made them aware that he was keeping the Torah mitzvahs even in a land that didn't necessarily agree with it. That's from a personal level of shlichut, a personal level of outgoingness and outreach. Then this week's Parsha, Parshas Vayishlach, and Yaakov sent, and this details how Yaakov sent messengers to inform Esav that he was coming, and it details how he sent messengers to that he was coming, and etc. And this emphasizes once a person has appreciated his own qualities, learned about his own qualities, and personally is comfortable with outgoing and doing outreach based on what he knows he's able to do, then he's also comfortable in educating others to do the same, to use their qualities. You're sending out emissaries. Not only that you realize that you're an emissary yourself to teach people and to enlighten people, but you're able to teach others that they should be emissaries, they should be shluchim, and their personal qualities and character traits, how they could enlighten other people, and they should be comfortable with that. Then there's the ultimate level of Vayeshev, which is next week's Torah portion, and Vayeshev means that he settled, which that stresses on once a person identifies with himself or herself, that they're able to do outreach and they're able to enlighten others, and then they're able to enlighten others that they're able to enlighten other people, and this continuing chain continues going. One day the world is going to be completely refined of all bad qualities and negative spirits, and Vayishlach, and it will be settled with the coming of Mashiach. We will be settled spiritually, we will be settled in godliness, we will be settled in our personal mission. That is the chronological order of the three Parshot, and we're in the middle of educating others how to educate others. That's the name of the Parsha. To start off with the Parsha, Yaakov prepares to confront Esav. I'm going to read inside in the English, starting on chapter 32, verse 4. Yaakov sent angels ahead of him to his brother Esav, to the land of Seir, to the fields of Edom. He instructed them, saying, "Say the following to my master, to Esav, this is what your servant Yaakov said. I have been living with Lavan like a stranger, and I have been delayed until now." If you look in the Hebrew words of verse 5, where it says, where Yaakov's telling his servant, "In Lavan garti," with Lavan I lived as a stranger, there's a very nice Pirush explanation. Why did Yaakov say I lived with Lavan as a stranger? It was a relative of his. He married his first wife and his second wife there. When you're trying to relate to Esav, what happened to him by the house of Lavan, why did he say I was a stranger? And there's a nice explanation given that the numerical value of the word Garti, the Gimel, the Resh, the Talaf, and the Yud, the Taf and the Yud, have the equivalent to the number 613. So Yaakov was really intending to share is that I was a stranger, I was in a foreign land that didn't exactly create my best environment for me to flourish in regards to Torah and mitzvos. However, I kept the 613 mitzvahs. He wanted to inform me. Something nice. So he continues and he says, I possess oxen, donkeys, flocks, servants, and maids. I have sent to tell this to my master to find favor in his eyes. Right? He's trying to, make good connections between himself and Esav. He wants to see his brother. And what happens is the messengers return to say that Esav is coming with 400 men and he's coming to kill and destroy Yaakov out of anger that Yaakov took his birthright. Just in general, he's also a wicked person. What does Yaakov do? Yaakov is now fearful. His older brother and his bully older brother that is out and coming with 400 men to kill him. And what he does is very interesting. Verse 8, Yaakov was very worried that he might be killed, and he pained that other people might be killed as well. So he divided the people who were with him, the flocks, the cattle, and the camels, into two camps. Verse 9, he said, if Esav comes to one camp and strikes it down, I will fight him, so the remaining camp will survive. Basically, what Yaakov is saying is, I'm going to separate the two camps. What he did was he separated his personal family, people that were related to him, in one area, and he separated the rest of this camp with all the cattle and everything in a different area. And then he continues and he prays to God, starting verse 10, and I'm going to read all the way through the entire prayer. Yaakov said, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Yitzchak, God who said to me, return to the land of your forefathers, to your birthplace, and I will be with you. My merits have become small due to all the acts of kindness and the true that you have done for your servant. So I'm scared that I've lost the merit to be saved from Esav, for when I would cross the river Jordan, I only had my stick, and now I have amassed two camps. Please save me. He's asking from God, please save me from the hand of my so-called brother, from the hand of Esav, for I'm afraid of him. He might come and strike me, and even a mother and their children. You said I will be good to you, and I will do good, and I will make your descendants as widespread as the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted because of their great number. So he's asking God, please God, can you save me from what's about to happen? Because Esav's marching with all his 400 men. And there's a very famous question that's asked right away when you read the order of events in which Jacob prepared himself for the destruction when Esav was coming with his 400 men. First, he takes action. He prepares for war. He divides his two camps. Then he goes and he prays to God and asking that nothing should happen. And I think it's actually Rashi who was troubled by this issue. Is normal when a person sees clearly that trouble is about to befall them, especially destructive trouble. The normal thing which you do is right away you say a prayer, no matter how small, how big, you right away ask God that this shouldn't happen. Please, on my merit or on my family's merit, please don't let us be destroyed, give us another chance. And then, being the fact that we are human and we live in a physical world and we shouldn't rely on spiritual miracles 24/7 to save us, we also should take action based on the laws of nature and hoping that God will save us, if not miraculously, through natural causes. So what does Jacob do? He takes natural action and he divides the camp so only one camp should be destroyed and not the other. And the question is, why Jacob, who's the forefathers of the Jewish nation, one of the most holiest Jews to ever live, why does he go backwards? First he takes action in splitting the camps, and then he goes and he prays to God. That's not a mistake that Yaakov Avinu would make. So to explain, the Rebbe says very nicely, if we go back to God's promise to Yaakov earlier, and that is in the previous Torah portion, chapter 28, verse 13. Chapter 28, verse 13, and I'll read. Suddenly God was standing over him, and he said, I am God, the God of Avram, your father, the God of Yitzchak, and I will give to you and to your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be as widespread as the dust of the earth, and you will be strong to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your descendants. So after Yaakov hearing this blessing that God gave to him, he wasn't nervous that his family would be wiped out. He knew that his family was going to be saved because God had promised him before that family was going to make it through and be blessed and etc. What he was nervous about was the people that he added to his camp through his travels. So what Yaakov was doing was not taking action and then praying to God. He was showing God who he's praying on behalf of. He splits up his family. He splits up the remaining people of his camp. It's part of the prayer. He's telling God, I know you promised me before that my personal family will make it out and we will flourish as a nation. But to these people who you did not promise about, these added people to my camp, please let them not be destroyed, etc. So it wasn't that he first took action and then he decided to pray, which would seem to be a little bit of a not the proper order of doing things. He in fact his splitting of the camps was an intention to be part of his prayer, to show God who he's praying on behalf of. Then he goes and he decides he's going to try to, make Esav happy, that he shouldn't try to conquer him. He's going to give him gifts to find favor in his eyes, and he sends him with more gifts. He says he took gifts of his possessions for his brother Esav. It says in verse 15, 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 20 ewes and 20 rams, 30 nursing camels with their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 10 female donkeys, and 10 male donkeys. And he gave them all separately to the hands of his servants. He came up with a strategic way of seeming that the present was much bigger than it seemed. Tactician. He spread out each group of animals. I think it was each group of animals. Yeah. He made space in between each group, like a day's worth of journey. So Esav would be sitting there for 7 to 10 days, seeing every day how more cattle's coming and more cattle's coming and more cattle's coming, to make it seem like this was this tremendous gift, in order that he should settle down, calm down, take the gift, and decide not to wage war. And what happens is, verse 23, we're back to chapter 32, verse 23. During that night he got up, he took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, and his 11 children, together with Dinah, who was hidden in a chest, Rashi explains, and crossed the shallow part of the river, the Yabok. Verse 24, he took them and he brought them across the stream. Then he went backwards and forwards, took across everything he had until all his family was separated. Now comes the famous fight, chapter 32, verse 25, the famous fight of Yaakov and Esav's guardian angels. And I'm going to read again through the text, starting with verse 25 through verse 30. I'll read it in here. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. When he perceived that he could not overcome him, when the man wrestling with Jacob realized that he was not strong enough to be Jacob, he struck the socket of his hip. So Jacob's hip socket was dislocated, and he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for dawn is broken." And that means that when the light comes out, it's bad for the angels. And he said, "I will not let you go until you bless me." Jacob had a firm grasp, and as the sun is coming forth, and it's not good for the angels to be out in the sun, he said, "I'm not letting you go until you bless me." And the angel responds to him, verse 28. He said to him, "What is your name?" He replied, "Jacob." He said, "No longer will your name be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with the divine and with man, and have overcome." And Jacob inquired, and he said, "Divulge, if you please, your name." And he said, "Why do you inquire of my name?" And he blessed him there. Angels, we all know that angels have multiple names depending on their mission. So when Jacob asked the angel, "What is your name?" at that appropriate, the angel didn't have a specific name. Depending on what mission he was carrying out, his name changes, so he just decided not to answer. And after he actually told Jacob he was going to be blessed later by God, did he leave? Verse 31, Yaakov named the place Peniel, God's face, because I saw God face to face, and my soul was saved. Verse 33, consequently to this day, the children of Israel may not eat the sciatic nerve of an animal, which arises by the hip joint, because the angel touched the joint of Yaakov's hip and the sciatic nerve. So, in commemorative of what the angel did to Yaakov, and he hurt his hip, so for the rest of time, Jews are not able to eat a good steak from that portion of the animal. Is that good meat? Is that considered good meat, that part?
Well,
Yeah.
the whole animal is kosher if you
Right.
know how to take it out properly.
Right.
So,
But I don't think the problem was a kashrut problem. The problem was just, it says forbidden in the Torah, in a commemorative form.
but I know that in Israel there are some Yemenites who know how to do it correctly,
Really?
and you can go and buy from them.
Really?
You can taste it out and it's probably good.
The reason we only eat the half, because you lose too much meat if you take out that tendon.
Uh-huh.
So essentially, economically, we only eat the first half. That's, whether you like it or not, there's economics involved
There's always economics.
in the United States. At least.
Always. A short insight about this fight with the guardian angel and the dislocation of his hip. Rambam says actually that this fight between Yaakov and the guardian angel alludes to the Jewish fight in the times of exile and ultimately overcoming and the coming redemption.
But what if they changed his name to Israel? Why do they keep using the name Yaakov?
They said he had two names.
This is a question we will expound at length after we go through the Parsha.
Fair enough.
That is a good question. So just a short truth, the Rambam says the struggle between the angel and Yaakov alludes to the struggle that we have in the times of exile, and just like Yaakov, when he, after this whole episode, comes back wholly healed, so too the Jewish people won't be scarred by all the events that happened in exile. We will come to the final redemption completely healed of all scars, the Holocaust, persecution throughout the entire history, will be as if it never happened. Very interesting insight. Now finally, after sending all the gifts, Yaakov decides to confront Esau. Chapter 33, verse 1. Yaakov looked around. Jacob raised his eyes and saw, behold, Esau was coming, and with him there were 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two handmaids. He put the handmaids and the children first, Leah and the children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. Then he himself went ahead of them and bowed earthward 7 times. He reached his brother. Esau ran towards him, embraced him, fell upon his neck, and kissed him, and they wept. It's very interesting if you look in the Hebrew word, verse 4. There's a word that has 5 dots on top. Vayishlach. Who sees it? It's the second to last word of the page of the Hebrew word. There's 5 dots on top. Very interesting. I believe it might be the only time, I'm not 100% sure, that there's 5 dots on top of the word. And the question is, what are these 5 dots alluding to?
There's 6 in my book.
Or 6. 6 dots. The numbers are right. 6 dots, my apologies. What are the 6 dots alluding to? And the explanation given is that it shows that his kiss that he gave Yaakov, there was something lacking in the way he embraced his brother. And there's a difference of opinion in what does it exactly mean that it wasn't as heartfelt of a kiss as it should have been. One explanation is that he didn't mean it. He just did it, brothers embracing. He didn't really like Yaakov, so it wasn't a real kiss. It wasn't a real kiss out of love. Another explanation says that it was a real kiss. However, the emotional aspect of the kiss didn't come forth until the second he gave the kiss. So he didn't go in with the proper attitude that he was going to give a kiss out of love, of not seeing his brother after a long time. His intentions were, no patience to see Yaakov. He was angry at Yaakov. But at the last second, he really did mean it out of love, but still it wasn't the proper chanas, it wasn't the proper preparation, the way he should have felt about his brother, and therefore the dots are come to tell us that there was a certain lack in the way he expressed himself after not seeing his brother for a long time.
But still, I can't see the point of the 6 dots.
It's a dot on each letter. It's nothing to do with 6. The word is 6 letters. So on each letter is a dot. Instead of putting 1 dot, there's plenty of...
What's the point of the dot?
To show us that there was a deficiency in the way he kissed. The word means kiss. Vayishlach means that he kissed him.
But do you find that anywhere else in the Torah?
I don't think so.
No.
Right? Do you find anywhere else in the Torah that someone kisses someone without proper intent?
No, but there's also places in the Torah where alphabets are different sizes, which
Right,
has
there-
different meanings, and so there are hidden
Hints.
meanings or hints within that we are supposed to investigate. So it's kind of giving us that, well, why is this different? And so we need to find out why, and therefore we learn more.
Non-Nishana.
Well, everything is questions. Questions.
It's Arnold, what do you mean?
The footnote also explains a little bit.
Which footnote?
4.
David, you want to read? Oh, I see it. Vayishlach, and he kissed him. In the Torah scroll, there are dots over each letter of this word, and exegetical device that calls attention to hidden allusions. The sages disagree regarding the significance of the dots in this verse. Some hold that Esav's kisses were insincere, but Rav Shimon bar Yochai says that although it is an immutable rule that Esav hates Jacob, at that moment his mercy was aroused, and he kissed Jacob with all his heart. Okay. To continue, now Jacob and Esav have now embraced, they've made up, and they start talking, and Esav saying, you don't have to give me the gifts, I have plenty of it, let me give you men to accompany you on your travels. Yaakov goes and says, I don't need it, I have plenty for myself, I'll be fine. And then they go on their different ways. On chapter 33, verse 16, on that day Esav went back to Seir, his usual hangout. 17, Yaakov traveled to Sukkos and built himself a house. He made huts for his cattle. Therefore, he named the place Sukkos. Like the holiday of Sukkos, where we all live inside Sukkos for 7 days, comes from the same idea, where they did Sukkos in the desert, and therefore we stay in Sukkos. Verse 18, after verse 18, here, Jacob arrived intact at the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, upon his arriving from Padan Aram, and he encamped before the city. Verse 19, he bought the parcel of land upon which he pitched his tent from the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pesitas. He set up an altar there and proclaimed, God, the God of Israel. Rashi, in verse 18, when it says that he came back whole, right? Jacob arrived intact at the city. The Hebrew word is Vayava Yaakov Sholem. He came complete. Rashi explains that Yaakov came complete physically. He was cured from his limp that he had gotten in the fight with the angel. He came financially. You would think that he maybe lost possessions on the way, or Esav maybe stole things from him. He came financially whole with all his wealth that he accumulated by Lavan. And at the same time, he came whole in Torah knowledge. There's no lack in Torah knowledge. Everything was still there. You would think after all his travels, maybe he didn't have enough time to review, he didn't have time to learn. Everything was still there. And the question that's asked is, why does Rashi feel the need to say that he came whole in his Torah knowledge? He came whole healthy and he came whole financially, why can't you just say that he came back peacefully? He traveled to see Lavan, he traveled to meet Esav. You would think maybe there's a chance he wouldn't make it back. So he came back and he returned. Why does Rashi have to expound and say that he came back with these three qualities? And the answer is because we knew from earlier that God blessed Jacob, that he would return healthy and he would return whole. But he didn't necessarily say you would come back wealthy. He didn't necessarily say you would come back peaceful. I actually could read it for you right here. God had only promised Jacob that he would not be harmed by other men, Esav and Lavan. He had not promised that Yaakov would not be harmed by an act of God, right? He said you're not going to be harmed by other humans. You're not necessarily going to be harmed by God himself. God had not promised Jacob would become or remain wealthy. He never said anything in regards to wealth. Thus, Rashi's explanation that he came back, telling us that he came back financially whole. And God did not promise that Jacob would not forget his Torah studies, which he had not been learning day and night because he was working day and night over the past 14, 15 years while he was working for Lavan. God never promised him that he would have all the knowledge in his head, and therefore Rashi is explaining to us that no, as a matter of fact, he did have all his Torah knowledge. Then he comes and he settles in Shechem, and the famous story with Dinah, Leah's daughter, whom she had born to Yaakov. The story is, I'll read, it's actually a little bit lengthy, but I'll read it anyway. It's about 18 verses, starting at chapter 34. Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had born to Jacob, went out to look over the daughters of the land. Shechem, son of Hamor, the Hivite, the prince of the region, saw her. He took her, he lay with her, and he violated her. He became deeply attached to Dinah, daughter of Jacob. He loved the maiden and appealed to the maiden's emotions. So Shechem spoke to Hamor, his father, saying, "Take me this girl for a wife." Verse 5, Now Jacob heard that he had defiled his daughter Dinah, while his sons were in the cattle in the field, so Jacob kept silent until they came back. Hamor, Shechem's father, went out to Jacob to speak to him. Jacob's sons arrived from the field. When they heard, the men were distressed and were fired deeply with indignation, for he had committed an outrage in Israel by lying with the daughter of Jacob. Such a thing may never be done. Hamor spoke with them, saying, Shechem, my son, longs deeply for your daughter. Please give her to him as a wife, and intermarry with us. Give your daughters to us, and take our daughters for yourselves. And among us you shall dwell. The land will be before you. Settle and trade in it, and acquire property in it. Verse 11, Then Shechem said to her father and brothers, Let me gain favor in your eyes, and whatever you tell me I will give. Inflate exceedingly upon me the marriage settlement and gifts, and I will give whatever you tell me. Only give me the maiden for a wife. Jacob's son answered Shechem and his father Hamor cleverly, and they speak because if he had defiled his sister Dinah. They said to him, We cannot do this thing to give our sister to a man who is uncircumcised, for that is a disgrace for us. Only on this condition will we acquiesce to you, if you become like us by letting every male among you become circumcised. Then we will give our daughters to you and take your daughters for ourselves. We will dwell with you and become a single people. But if you not listen to us to be circumcised, we will take our daughters and go. The proposal seemed good in the view of Hamor and in the view of Shechem, Hamor's son. The youth did not delay doing the thing, for he wanted Jacob's daughter. Now he was the most respected of all his father's household. Verse 20, Hamor with his son Shechem came to the gate of the city and spoke to the people of the city, saying, These people are peaceable with us. Let them settle in their land and trade in it. For see, there is ample room in the land for them. Let us take their daughters for ourselves as wives and give our daughters to them. Only on this condition will the people acquiesce with us to dwell with us to become a single people, that all our males be circumcised, and they themselves are circumcised. Their livestock, their possessions, and their animals will they not be ours. Only let us acquiesce to them, and they will settle with us. All the people who depart through the gate of the city listen to Hamor and his son Shechem, and all the males, all those who depart through the gate of the city, were circumcised. The last two verses. And it came to pass, verse 25, and it came to pass on the third day when they were in pain, that two of Jacob's sons, Shimon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, each took his sword, and they came upon the city confidently, and they killed every male. And Hamor and Shechem, his son, they killed at the point of sword. They took Dinah from Shechem's house and left. So, pretty crazy episode, pretty crazy story. Dinah is caught checking out to see what the women of this foreign land, what did they do, what they were like. and she's captured and she's violated, and Shechem wants to marry Dinah. And being that the brothers and the protective brothers that they were, and also the way the story went down, that he violated her and they're being all distressed, they make a plan of retaliation, and they tell everyone of the city, you must get a Brit Milah, you must get circumcised in order for the intermarriages to work. And on the third day, which they say is the most painful day, I don't really remember, but they say it's the most painful. They came in and everyone was weak and they slaughtered all the men of the city. There's a very interesting question that's asked. If you see chapter 34, verse 1, it says, Dinah, Leah's daughter, whom she had born to Yaakov. And the question, which we'll talk about after we finish going through the Torah portion, is, you see later that it says Dinah, Yaakov's daughter. Why does it start off with Dinah, Leah's daughter? Is it Dinah? Maybe it should say Dinah, Leah, and Yaakov's daughter. Dinah and Yaakov and Leah's daughter. It says Dinah, Leah's daughter, whom Leah had born to Yaakov. It's a very interesting way of expressing things. I think it might be also one of the only times we mention just the mother, or especially mother and daughter. Just continue the story. Oh, and another interesting explanation, when it goes to verse 25, so chapter 34, verse 25, so it says, and it came to pass on the third day when they were in pain, the two of Jacob's sons, Shimon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, each took his sword, and they came upon the city confidently and killed every male. If you look in the Hebrew word, it says, Vayichu shnei b'nei Yaakov, Shimon v'Levi, achei Dinah, and they took the sons of Yaakov, Shimon and Levi, the brothers of Dinah, ish charbay, each man with a sword. The Midrash says that Levi, who was younger than Shimon, was at the age of just turning 13. And the Torah uses the word ish, man, which symbolizes for the years to come, which became known as the bar mitzvah, that when does the Torah liken the age of manhood is the age of 13. That's the first time that it is stressed. So that is interesting as well. Then Yaakov gets upset at Shimon and Levi. They disgrace the family name. They cause problem in the lands. They say that he even later when he came to bless them, he mentions it again, that he wasn't happy with what they had done. Now Yaakov is journeying to a place called Beis El. You look at chapter 35, and this is when God personally changes Yaakov's name. Verse 9. God appeared, verse 9, chapter 35. And God appeared to Jacob again when he became from Padan Aram, and he blessed him. And God said to him, your name is Jacob. Your name shall not always be Jacob, but Israel shall be your name. Thus he called the name Israel. And God continues blessing him. I'll read God, verse 11. I am Almighty God, who will bless you, be fruitful and multiply. A nation, your name is, and God said to him, I am Kalshakai, be fruitful and multiply. A nation and congregation of nations shall descend from you, and kings shall issue forth from your loins. The land that I gave to Abraham and Isaac, and I will give to you and your offspring after you, I'll give the land. And God ascended from upon him in the place where he had spoken with him. Back to Jerry's question, we see that, I'll take the question further, we see another name change earlier in the beginning of this book of Bereshit, where God changes Avraham's name from Avram to Avraham. The extra letter hey, adding, and we see that he never goes back to the name Avram. In the entire 5 books of Moses, we never again go back to the name Avram. And furthermore, it says if you go back to the name Avram, you have transgressed. So why now, when God's changing Jacob's name to Israel, does he continue going back? And sometimes he uses the word Jacob, sometimes he uses the word Israel, sometimes he uses both in the same sentence. What's up? What's the difference in the name changes? We'll get back to that as well. Binyamin is born and Rachel passes away. Chapter 35, verse 16. They journeyed from Bethel, and they were still a stretch of land to go to Ephrat, when Rachel went into labor and had difficulty in her childbirth. And it was that when she had difficulty in her labor that the midwife said to her, "Have no fear, for this one too is a son for you." And it came to pass, as her soul was departing, for she died, and she called his name Ben-Oni, but his father called him Benjamin. Thus Rachel died and was buried to the road to Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. This is the famous story of Rachel's tomb, Cave of Rachel, who I had personally the pleasure to go visit recently. Now they made it a little bit safer than it used to be, but I don't know the exact history of Israel, but apparently there were times where the Arabs were owning it, or they were in control of that land, and it was very problematic. I actually just read a story, funny that it's also this week's Parsha. I read a story last week. There's a Jewish magazine that goes out, and the story, I'll say it in short, there's a woman American woman who married an American guy that moved to Israel. They start their life, and her friend, nothing to do with her, asked her if she would want to be a group of 10 women that would go pray by Rachel's tomb. She was going through some tough times. Her friend, and they went and prayed. They each took a portion of the Tehillim, a portion of Psalms. They said it, they danced, they sang. A car ride back, they were dancing and singing. And it happened to be the song that they were singing had something to do with the fact of, may you be fruitful and multiply. And it happened to be that this woman, who was married for a good amount of years, did not have any children. And they tried, and they still didn't have children. And she says that 9 months from that night around, they were blessed with a baby. And she links the story. Even what's a mother? I have a mother, Baruch Hashem. She's a great woman, and many of you know her. A mother knows what her son needs without her son even saying. It happens to me multiple times. It happens to be the girl that I'm getting married to. God willing, my mother always said, in the beginning when I used to tell her about the dates, she would be like, "I don't know, Levi. I have a feeling we don't know that much about her yet, but this sounds like a good one for you." A mother has an intuition and intuitive knowledge of what her children needs. And she says that even though I didn't go on behalf of myself to pray for children, she felt that she was doing a mitzvah for her friend, and Rachel, Mama Rachel, as we say, I guess, felt that she also deserved blessing and blessed her. So it's funny that I read the story last week, and we're also mentioning it now. But anyways, to continue, quickly, Reuven moves Yaakov's bed. Basically, Yaakov comes back and decides to sleep with Bilhah and not Leah, and Reuven gets angry and moves his father's bed, only to repent later. Then it goes and tells about Yaakov's descendants, and that Yitzchak passes away. He was 180 years old. Yitzchak was 180 years old, and he passed away. Then it goes through Esav's descendants, Seir's descendants, and then talks about the 8 kings of Edom, and thus concludes the Torah portion. It's a pretty packed Torah portion. I want to get to 2 insights in my notes here. Did a little prep. I'm not a seasoned veteran. There's 2 interesting insights that I found, one early in the week and one today. One about the name change, where we see that God goes back to calling him Jacob after changing his name to Israel, and also about the story of Dinah, where the Torah specifically mentions that she was the daughter of Leah, and not the daughter of Leah and Jacob. And that whole episode there, what happened, why, obviously something had to have happened that God made that she would get violated. What was that story there? We'll learn about it. So about the name change, where do we mention it? Where God... So chapter 35, verse 10. God said to him, "Your name is Yaakov, you will no longer be Yaakov. You will be Yisrael." So I'll rephrase the question again by our previous name change we had in the Torah portion. I'm not sure what Parsha was, maybe Chaisar or Vayera. God says, you no longer shall be called Avram, but you will be called Avraham. And the name change is as follows. Avram means Avram means exalted father, and by adding the hey, it says the exalted father of many. So God was saying, Avram, you're exalted father, and then they had a child, and God changed his name to exalted father of many. So you're never going to go back from saying exalted father of many to exalted father. That's something we're not going to do. That's a real name change. The name's the same, just the meaning is an added meaning. There's no reason to go back and to go back down a level to just say an exalted father. Exalted father of many is a big name, and therefore we never go back to the name Avram. When it comes to Yaakov and Yisrael, they're not the same name at all. They mean two different things. They represent two different things, both in the name itself, both in the spiritual significance, as we'll see soon. And God is perfectly comfortable with having both names. Yes, Yisrael is the higher name, it's an elevated name, but only after we'll see what Yaakov means and what Yisrael means will we fully understand what exactly is the name change and why do we keep both. Both names are even used in today's day. Some children are named Yisrael, some children named Yaakov. I think Shalom Ber Shevet says twins. One named Yisrael and one named Yaakov, if I remember correctly. Right? So, first there's an interesting, when Bilam goes to curse out, the pagan prophet goes to curse out the Jews, and there's a miracle, and he starts blessing them very nicely. He says a very interesting line: God sees no guilt in Yaakov, in Jacob, nor toil in Israel. What does this mean? God doesn't see any guilt in Yaakov nor toil in Israel. So we have to understand, what does the name Yaakov represent? What does it mean? What does the name Israel represent? And what does it mean? So we'll start with Yaakov. Yaakov was given the name Yaakov. We know the word Akev, the root of the word Yaakov, means heel, which he was given the name because he came out of the womb grasping Esau's heel. He was struggling, he was fighting, he wanted to come out first, but Esau ultimately came out first. That's why he was called Yaakov. Another meaning to the name Yaakov is deception. We know when it came to acquire the birthright, Jacob deceived his father Yitzchak. He put on fake hairy arms, each lowered his voice, and Yitzchak, who was blind, couldn't tell that it was Esau, and he gave Yaakov the blessing of the firstborn. That's the name Yaakov. In a spiritual sense and in a practical sense, what we learn from the name Yaakov, struggle, and is that it represents the type of Jew, your average type of Jew, your main type of Jew, the type of Jew that is born into this world with a mission, and due to the physical and hardships and ungodly things that this world possesses, we struggle. We're akev. We're grasping on the heel. We're fighting. We're trying to advance ourselves in godliness, but at the same time, we seem to have maybe a 2-step forward, 1-step back type of mentality. 100% normal. Everyone, so-called, has their challenges, but we should remember that God gives anyone who has a challenge, God gives them the opportunity to overcome that challenge. So the name Yaakov again represents struggle, and it alludes to a person, to us, to ourselves, our personal struggle in the day-to-day world as we try to perfect ourselves in our service to God, at the same time fighting against what this world is trying to push against that and push back against us. The name Yisrael, which God changed his name to, means Sar Kel, minister of God, or Liroish, my head, and that is basically alludes to a perfect Jew, a Jew that has now overcome his obstacles. He has no longer anything in the way between him and God. He is now perfect and is able to serve God in perfection without any distractions. So basically what God is telling Yaakov, you had to struggle in the womb. You had to deceive to get the first birthright. You had to go work 14 years in Lavan's house. You had to deal with Esau chasing after you. You went through all your physical hardships in this world. You overcame fighting the angel. And now you've overcome it. And I'm going to change your name to Sar Kel, to minister of God, a perfect servant to God. That's telling us that we should strive to overcome all our obstacles just like Jacob did. And then we will transform ourselves and come from someone battling against physicality in this world to attaining a perfect spiritual wholeness to serve God. And the fact, so that's on a level that there's two types of Jews. Not only is there two types of Jews, the Rebbe says, but in each Jew, we possess both of these aspects at the same time sometimes. There could be a time of day where you're struggling, you're wanting to do something good, but at the same time there's something holding you back. And then there could be a time of day, like right now, where we're all sitting in class and learning Torah, where we're at a nice, perfect level. There's nothing distracting us. We're sitting, we're learning God's wisdom. And that is why God goes back and later on throughout the Parsha and uses the term Jacob. It happens to be that Jacob also continued to struggle in the fact that he lost his son for 22 years and he was mourning a physical struggle. But God is telling us that there are the Yaakovs and the Yisraels in the type of people you could be ultimately, but at the same time, in the day-to-day life, before you're one or the other, you also have both going on at the same time. Just like the name switches back and forth throughout the entire portion, is showing us that sometimes we are Jacob, we're struggling, we're fighting, and sometimes we're Yisrael. We don't have any hardships and we're serving God perfectly. And the lesson speaks for itself, but the lesson for us is that you should maintain a constant conscience of the fact that Jacob, which is struggling, doesn't mean failure. It means that you're struggling, you might get knocked back down, but God, just like God gave Jacob the ability to overcome all his obstacles, God also gives everyone else the opportunity to overcome their obstacles. And ultimately, they'll become a true minister of God, a tzaddik. This is the difference between tzaddik and Beinoni, a righteous person who's whole and doesn't have any averot, doesn't have any sins, and a Beinoni, someone who struggles back and forth. But one thing is that we should remember is, one, that we have the ability to become a perfect minister to God, a perfect servant of God, and at the same time, with our struggles, we have the ability to overcome our struggles. That's in regards to the name change. I hope that answers the question. In regards to the story of Dinah, and that is earlier, or later. Dinah, chapter 34. Chapter 34. The question was, it says, Dinah, this is an interesting one, Dinah, Leah's daughter. Why does it say Leah's daughter? Why doesn't it say Jacob and Leah's daughter? Why doesn't it say Leah and Jacob? If it wants to say Leah first, then it say Leah then Jacob. But just to say Leah is a very puzzling statement. Rashi goes on an explanation, excuse me, and says the reason why the Chumash says, the Torah says that it was Leah's daughter is that she possessed the exact same qualities as Leah. What quality was that? What personality trait was that? Was an outgoingness. Leah was a very outgoing type of woman. If you go back to, let me see if I can find it. I should have my phone somewhere.
I'll take your word for it.
You take my word for it. Oh, I have it. If you go back to chapter 30, verse 16. When Yaakov came from the field in the evening, Leah came out towards him. She was outgoing. She said, "You can come to me tonight because I have paid a fee for you with my son's jasmine plants." And he slept with her that night. She was an outgoing, upfront type of woman. And Leah possessed that same quality and that same upfrontness. And she, who maybe not like most women, went out to see the daughters of the land. She wanted to see what was going on. And at first glance, it seems to say that we know that Torah perception and demand of women is to be tzniut, to be modest. Dress modestly, act modestly, not to be so upfront, not to be so brazen. And Rashi, at first glance, it seems to say that Rashi is trying to say that because Dinah wasn't so modest, so to say, she was upfront, trying to get herself out there. Maybe that's why God decided to have, that this tragedy should befall. But right away, the Medrash and all the sages say this cannot be. because first of all, that would say that Leah's outgoingness was a problem, and we know that Leah is one of the matriarchs, so that can't be. And at the same time, if we go back to the story of when Esau came to attack Jacob, it says that we mentioned that Jacob put Dinah in a box, moved all his children. It doesn't mention Dinah. Rashi says that Dinah was put into a box. Why was she put into a box? Because Jacob was scared that Esau would lay eyes on his niece, his personable niece, his outgoing niece, his beautiful niece, and he'd want to marry her. And Jacob knew how wicked Esau was. He didn't want her to marry her. He wanted her to marry him and his wickedness. And therefore he hid her, that Esau shouldn't see her. The Medrash says that it was that fault of Jacob for hiding Dinah, because what could have happened, what should have happened, was that Esau would see Dinah, her sincerity, her purity, her personality would overtake him and would transform his wicked ways to good ways. And it's because that Yaakov didn't allow that to happen that God made this tragedy happen, and that she was violated. And an interesting note, which I actually didn't know till today, was that when Jacob got married to Leah and Rachel, what was really supposed to happen, and actually people at the time were talking about it, was that Lavan had 2 daughters and Rivka had 2 sons. And what was going to happen was that Esau, the oldest son, would marry the oldest daughter, Leah, and the younger daughter, Rachel, would marry Yaakov. And the Medrash says that it was supposed to be that way. It was supposed to be a bashert. It was supposed to be, God arranged that was supposed to happen in the heavens. But what happened was, it says in the Pasuk, Leah's eyes were weak. Why were they weak? Because she spent so much time earlier crying to God that she didn't feel she would be able to handle Esau's wickedness. So she asked God if he can cancel the so-called shidduch and that she should marry Yaakov, which ended up happening. But she gave birth to a daughter, Dinah. And we know that besides for possessing physical similarities of daughter to mother or kids to their parents, there is also a certain spiritual resemblance and similarity as expressed here in the personalities, that they were the same, Dinah and Leah. And what could have been was, what should have been was, that Dinah would have taken the place of her mother Leah and kind of made up for her shortcomings, and she would have won over Esau and changed over his wicked ways. So the fact that Jacob hid her and did not allow this to happen, that was why really God said that God decided that this tragedy should befall upon her. Now the question is, back to the original question, we know that it wasn't because she was immodest. So why was she going out and trying to see what the girls of the land, the ladies of the land were like? Right? What was the intention? Rashi's not going to say it just to tell us random information that she went out and she was curious. So the Rebbe says that she, with her personality and her outgoingness, wanted to change over the women of the land. She wanted to make them holy women. She wanted to do outreach to them. The theme of the Parsha, outreach. She wanted to express godliness to them, which we know that in the history of the Bible, when it talks about what the men did and the women did, and there's many fascinating stories, but the main thing you see by the men is that they were conquerors, and they were leaders, and they were leaders in like physical leaders of nations, and women, which were also tremendous, but they were leaders in the home. They were spiritual leaders. They were raising the children. Not many of the women. There are some fascinating stories about women throughout the Bible, but not many of the women do you have these stories of them being more outgoing. And Rashi wanted to tell us and the women of the generation that if you feel you have the ability to go out there and change over other women, to practice Judaism and to do outreach and to make godliness aware, you should be like Dinah and 100% go out there and practice that fine work. And she was similar to Leah in that regard, that they had that outgoing personality, that they were not only able to hold the house down and be sincere and kind and giving for the children and the needs of the house, but they were also able to express and do outreach of Judaism outward. And that is why Dinah and Leah are singled out due to their tremendous power and able to do outreach. I think if I could say one thing from this parsha, I don't think I've learned it as in depth that I have over this past few days. The message of this week's Parsha is pretty clear, is that everyone has the ability to do outreach both inwardly and outwardly, both personally and to their surroundings. And may we be blessed with a good week in the coming of Mashiach. And now I'm open to advice.
You just explained something very important to me.
What do I have?